File 142, carbon capture and sequestration. I think we took some public testimony, and as we left it last time, Senator Scott was going to work on an amendment. So we'll do that, and then we'll see what people think about this. So Senator Scott, we go to you. And we've got the same buzzing in the room, Senator Scott, that we had this morning.
Yeah. Okay. Mr. Chairman, what we've done is worked up a unified amendment drawing from a number of sources, and I appreciate had help from Senator Boner and Senator Barlow in particular, and from Mary Throne on the Public Service Commission. And I'm very thankful to everybody for that help. It's extensive amendment, Mr. Chairman, and let me explain the things that it does. And they're not in any particular order. So forgive me if I jump around a little bit.
So just double check. We should have the proposed amendment?
Yeah, the proposed amendment was circulated. Each one of you got it. Several of you had a slightly earlier version of it that the LSO made a couple of technical corrections in.
Oh, I found it. There's one that says proposed amendment from the Public Service Commission, but there's one that's in LSO form behind it.
Yeah, there's an LSO proposed amendment that is goes to an 8th page. Mr. Chairman, first thing it does is at the suggestion actually from the Public Service Commission, there was a confusion in the definition in the original bill was using the same definition for facility and unit and using them interchangeably. The suggestion was there's a definition of a coal-fired generation unit, which you can see on page 1 of the amendment, starting at line 27. That was put in, and then that was used throughout. So a lot of the volume of this amendment is making that substitute so that that definition is clear and used consistently. The old facility definition is retained. There's a couple of places where it's needed, but in general, we've changed that to coal-fired electric generation unit throughout. So that's a mass change, Mr. Chairman. The second thing it does is it gets rid of the provisions that are similar to Public Service Commission procedural requirements, but aren't quite the same. They're not necessary because the PSC's got the substance already covered. And that the Second Amendment does that. An example, page 6 of the amendment at line 16. If you look back in the bill, it's on page 25, lines 8 through 10. And what it's doing, this says any person aggrieved by a public utilities rejection, et cetera. We deleted that because it's covered by the Public Service Commission's processes, and so it's unnecessary here. And I don't know whether in this case there's slight differences in the exact way they do it or not, but the substance is the same. And we've got a number of those in here. That's the second thing it does, Mr. Chairman. The third thing it does is gets rid of all the bonding provisions that are actually referring to bonding. And that starts, starts on page 2 of the amendment at line 14, or if you look in the bill, It's page 9, right at the bottom of the bill. And then there's some massive deletes as we go through, and some specialized work because we retain, Mr. Chairman, the Public Service Commission's study as to how much has actually been created through rates to offset the costs. And we retain the study by the Department of Environmental Quality that's right at the end of the bill that takes a hard look at, is what's being done adequate, or are there going to be extra expenses? So those features are retained, and there's a compromise provision in the amendment where before there was a provision they could segregate off the fly ash ponds. The compromise amendment in the amendment, the compromise version of that in the amendment is they can do that, but they have to have all the parties involved agreeing, including the utility that's selling. And it has to make physical sense. So you've got that provision in there, Mr. Chairman. The next thing that it does, and you find, is it puts in two provisions that deal with changes in the unit that may
Can I do a check, Senator Scott?
Sure.
Can people in the back hear? You doing okay? Yeah, okay.
Okay, I'm trying to talk into the microphone as best I
Get
can.
it pointed right
Mr.
at you.
Chairman,
Go for it.
because I know the problems we've got in this room. This one inserts two provisions regarding the changes to a unit that may present CO2 recovery. Those can be found on page 3, I believe it is, of the amendment, starting at line well, wait a minute, page 2 of the amendment, starting at line 34, we put in a new subsection B because one of the possibilities would be to change from an coal-fired electric generation unit, convert that to a natural gas unit. And natural gas, Mr. Chairman, we don't have the technology to recover CO2 from natural gas, and the stream is a good deal richer because so much of the energy comes from the hydrogens in the methane. So that does preclude the kind of carbon capture that you could get with a coal-fired unit. And that provision says if that happens, the Public Service Commission will determine the public interest as to whether that conversion is warranted or not. And that's a specific issue that may occur, I think probably more likely on the Jim Bridger unit than the Dave Johnson unit, but it is a possibility. So they'll investigate that. And then it adds the language that wants a study that's due January 1st, before January 1st, 2024. And that language came from the Wyoming Industrial Electric customers, and we stole their language there. So that broadens that to cover the contingencies that may arise there. Mr. Chairman, the next change is a compromise on the issue of output reduction. There was a prohibition in here against an output reduction, and what we were trying to do, Mr. Chairman, was prevent them from just letting the power plant sit there, saying essentially they might use it sometime or they might use it a little, and just let it sit there and deteriorate, as opposed to actively using it to sequester, capture carbon, and actively using it to give stability to the grid.
Senator Scott, for the benefit of everyone, can you, as you walk through, can you give us page number so that everybody can stay with you?
I'll try.
Okay.
And
If you have it, that would be helpful.
I've got them on most of them, Mr. Chairman. That compromise is found, is found on page 6 of the amendment, on line 5. Let me double check that I've got the right line there. Yes, and it's a reference to page 23, line 17. Deletes the 35% and goes to 10%. And one thing that's important in understanding this amendment, Mr. Chairman, is other provisions in the bill that are untouched give the Public Service Commission latitude to go, I believe it's 20 percentage points above or below that, if there's reason to. So they could take that requirement all the way to 0. And there was some testimony that that requirement could give us trouble with the 5-state compact and give us trouble with the price of things. This amendment will give the Public Service Commission ample authority, if those fears are accurate, to deal with it, but still retains a prohibition against just
Okay.
letting it sit
Go
there.
on, Senator Scott, and we'll try to jump in and help on those page numbers and things to keep everybody on track as well. So keep going, Senator. Thank you.
So that one is a key thing. It is on that's reference to page 23, line 17 in the bill. And that is essentially a compromise provision, Mr. Chairman. The next thing it does is we took advantage of the fact the Public Service Commission is very well familiar with the existing statutes that we've already passed, and Senator Barlow was quite helpful in this. We did a better job of meshing this with the existing laws. You can see an example of that in the amendment on page 7, line 4, where reference is to, let's see, wait a minute. No, I'm sorry, Mr. Chairman, I'm off on that. It's page 8, line 4, where we're deleting a section that on page 39 and page 40 of the bill that proved to be unnecessary and confusion. Amendment to 37-133, and the Public Service Commission said better off not doing that particular amendment. And there were several features of those. Another thing we did on page 38, there was a provision on the carbon capture, applying profits to stranded costs, and the Public Service Commission recommended removing that provision. It's 37-18-209, and that they said, look, that's a complicated issue that we handled perfectly well, and we don't need additional legislative guidance on. So we took that all the way out, Mr. Chairman. And that, Mr. Chairman, that's a quick run through. Basically, virtually, there's a few little language things, a few little improvements the PSC suggested. For example, there's a provision in there that used on the penalty provision where somebody's promised to do carbon capture and then gets an advantage and then doesn't carry through. There's a penalty provision, and there's a trigger that if the price is under, I lose $50 a barrel, West Texas Intermediate, the penalty doesn't apply. Public Service Commission said, don't do it as one instantaneous thing. Say it has to be that way for 30 days. That made sense to us. Mr. Chairman, that was an improvement. And there was a few of those little things, and that's just one example of that. Mr. Chairman, that's a quick run through. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Okay, questions for the senator? Any questions? Thank you, Senator Scott. Let's hear what other folks have to say. Public Service Commission, you did all the hard work. Commissioner Throne, do you want to talk about the amendment? I heard she wrote it.
Well, I didn't write all of it, Mr. Chairman. I'm just happy to answer any questions if you have any. Oops, now that we're all here.
So have you thought about the implications of the amendment in the bill and whether the bill is more workable, less workable?
I mean, Mr. Chairman, Senator Scott didn't agree with all of my proposed changes, but I do believe it's more workable. Mm-hmm. My objective was to make it clear what it applies to, so that, and the way it's written now, I believe that it applies to units of 300 megawatts or more in sort of a standalone section, and cross-references as necessary to SF 159 and Senate 5 and House Bill 200 are included. But we all worked hard, but it's never perfect, and that's why we do 3 readings on each side and 2 committee meetings, as you know.
Yes, we certainly do. So one of your goals was to make it more conforming with the existing statute.
Yes, Mr. Chairman.
Okay. Questions for the Public Service Commission? Questions really, it's Commissioner Throne, but Senator Landon.
Mr. Chairman, thank you. Commissioner, thanks for all your efforts. It's going to take me a while to catch up to all of this. Are you satisfied that the bill interacts with 159 and 200 in an adequate way and doesn't derail anything that we're doing?
Mr. Chairman,
Go ahead.
Senator Landon, to the best of my ability with the time given.
Senator Scott.
Chairman, on that one, it does do some things that are different because the world has changed. It puts more of an emphasis on carbon capture because that's economic in a way it wasn't previously. Mr. Chairman.
Go ahead.
I do have one question for Commissioner Throne.
Go ahead.
I was seeking, as we went through this, to try to get a consensus on the key points. My question is, did we succeed in getting a consensus on the key points?
Commissioner Throne.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Senator Scott, my colleagues are just getting the amendment. I'm not sure we've resolved all of our concerns about implementing output reduction, but it's definitely more workable. We have to look at that one sort of collectively to confirm that it works for us, but it's definitely better than it was. Is that too honest of an answer?
No, we like
Mr.
honesty.
Chairman?
Seems like it was carefully chosen words, so good. Anybody else? Senator Scott?
No, I was just going to say that may be an example of Senator Landon's. It's a good thing. It's 2 houses and 3 readings in each house.
How about anybody else from the Public Service Commission? Mr. Chairman. Welcome to corporations. All right, and our chief counsel, how are you? All right, so let's pick up and go into public comment with the idea of addressing the amendment, but you're welcome to address the bill as well. We still had public comment open. And Mr. Parfit, did you have anything about the amendment that you wanted to address? I'd get you first. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I should be brief. Just quickly taking a look at the amendments and where they are located, I think it addressed many of the points that we had raised, particularly related to the bonding calculations. But I would say there are still a few of the suggested amendments that we had provided that would still be applicable. And I can run through that real quickly.
Okay, go ahead.
So first off, on page 8, line 23 of the original bill, including language that would ensure that we don't run into conflict with the Class 6 UIC primacy program, inserting that language that we had provided previously.
Debbie, do we have that language, you think? Yeah, we got this one. Yeah. Thank you, Mr. Parfit. Keep going.
Okay, and then on the next page of that suggested amendments, page 41, line 19, I think we're okay if nothing gets changed there. The point was that that's a joint effort between the Public Service Commission and the DEQ. So I think that the current language accomplishes that. However, I would suggest the next comment that we had on page 42, lines 4 through 6, that change actually be made to reflect that, as I understand it, the first report would be due in October of 2023. We're okay with that, but the second report, we believe, would require some sort of an appropriation to hire a consultant to accomplish the requested activities. But as I understood that, we could come back to the legislature in the budget session and request that funding to do the work. However, if we do that, we would have to move the due date from July 1, 2024 to some date outside of that.
And do you have any idea how much the money is?
Well, Mr. Chairman, our original estimate, based on what we knew of the facilities or units that would be applicable at that time, we recommended $500,000 for the study based on 2 facilities and 6 units.
Okay.
And then, Mr. Chairman, again, on page 42, if we go with the amendments on page 42, lines 4 through 6, we would also recommend on lines 8 through 11, striking the language, the Department of Environmental Quality shall submit an accounting of costs associated with completing the study, because we really wouldn't need that. We would be coming back for an appropriation, and we would be working jointly with the commission on that. So, and then lastly, the reporting out to the Minerals Committee and the Joint Appropriations, having that the Commission and the DEQ provide that reporting. So with that, Mr. Chairman, I'll take any questions you might have.
Okay, any questions? Questions? With regards to the appropriations, obviously we could add one in the bill now, and Senator Scott will say no, and it would slow it up and take it to appropriations. It's possible they could add the appropriations in the second house, or we could get it in the budget session. Those are all possibilities. Senator Scott.
Mr. Chairman, I would resist putting an appropriation
I
at
thought you
this
might.
time. I think that we'll have a much better estimate after they've done the preliminary report and had time to think about what they really need and how much it's really going to cost.
Okay.
And I do think if they do need significant additional work, we will have to put the July date off.
Okay. Mr. Parfit, anything back for you? Anything from the committee?
So, Mr. Chairman, just one comment on the appropriation. I agree with what Senator Scott is saying. I just would suggest or recommend that there's clarifying language in the bill to say just that, as opposed to leaving it open-ended that we are to provide that report, and right now with no funding or.
So something like a section that says the Department of Environmental Quality is directed to provide for the appropriation for the study in this section in their next budget.
Mr. Chairman, I would agree with that.
Okay. It's a thought. Oh, the PSC wants money too. Thank you. Anything else for the department? Thank you very much, Mr. Parfit. Commissioner Throne.
Mr. Chairman, we just found a potential missed electric generation facility. So it's on page 2, line 43 and 44. That should be electric generation unit, not the whole facility,
Okay.
because only the
The very
larger
last
unit.
word on page 2, Senator Scott. Okay.
Yeah. And that would have to carry through, excuse me, Mr. Chairman,
Keep going
that would have to carry through that paragraph.
with all the subparts, yes.
Any place that says or facilities, it just should be that narrower subset of the larger units. I apologize
It's
for not
okay.
noticing that before.
I'm not, you fixed the one on line 14, the definition, page 4, line 14?
Mr. Chairman, are you on the bill or the amendment?
I'm on the bill, sorry.
4 line 14 is defining a coal generation
Facility.
facility. That term is used a time or two where you need to use
Okay.
it. So that's the definition of that.
All right. You might have to define unit somewhere
Mr. Chairman, we did.
in the amendment.
in
Okay,
the
great.
amendment.
Yeah. It's-
Okay.
Mr. Chairman, that definition of unit is on page 1, line 25 of the
Amendment,
amendment.
I see it. Okay, that's where you get to 300 megawatts. Okay, thank you. Any further questions for Commissioner Throne? She disappeared. She went behind the pillar. All right, so how about if we open this up and get people's comments on the bill and on the amendment? Mr. Nelson? Welcome.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman, committee. Thank you for the chance to speak to the amendment that's been proposed. My name is Thor Nelson, again, on behalf of the Wyoming Industrial Energy Consumers. I want to begin by thanking Senator Scott and others for all of the hard work that has gone into this amendment. It's a complicated bill and it's a complicated amendment, but I think in large part, it does address some of the areas of concern that WIAC had raised in our testimony, and so we are appreciative of that. I rise today because I think the one major area of concern with the bill that the amendment does not cover, I do want to flag, and that is, if you recall my testimony from last week, it related to the portion of this bill that provides the PSC with the authority to regulate the cost of the sale of carbon dioxide, which is again an area that goes beyond the commission's current authority. And I guess I spoke about this a little bit, but in an effort to try to give the committee an idea of how you might approach this, I would offer the following. I think that last week I had proposed you could just delete the entirety of section 206 and 207 in an effort to try to be more surgical. What I would suggest to the committee in light of the amendment that's been offered is the following. If you look at page 28 of the bill, section 206A creates an obligation on the utility to negotiate for the sale of carbon dioxide stream. as a practical matter, that's fine, that we think that a requirement for them to negotiate and maintain some sort of private contract sale is fine. The problem comes in with subsection B of section 206. And what I would encourage the committee to consider is the following. On line 9 of page 29, insert the language after the word party, comma, determine if the public utility complied with subsection A of this section. And then delete the remainder of B, and then the remainder of section 206, so the rest of page 29 and 30. And what that does is it says to the commission, it says the utility, you are obligated to negotiate a sale. It says to the commission, you have the power to determine if the utility negotiated and did its job, but you as the commission are not going to then replicate the competitive market and set a price for this otherwise competitive transaction of carbon dioxide. And I add that and suggest that because I think with that change, although I've only had about 10 minutes to review this amendment, I think that the lion's share of the major issues that we had with the bill as introduced will be resolved, and the bill going forward will be in a much better position to accomplish what we think the senator and the legislature is trying to accomplish.
So any questions for Mr. Nelson? So Mr. Nelson, let me understand what you're saying. You're saying that as the utility negotiates the carbon dioxide price, that we don't really need the commission to be involved in that. That's not really in their expertise, and we have a presumption that that's a arm's length transaction of some sort. Is there any circumstance that that would not be an arm's length transaction?
Mr. Chairman, as I understand the current process that Rocky Mountain Power is undertaking, all of the paths lead to an arm's length transaction, meaning that the entity, the utility who owns the coal plant will be different from the entity who will be interested in purchasing the carbon. I do think that there is every reason to expect that the utility will have every incentive to monetize the carbon to the extent possible, but that language would provide a backstop to make sure that the utility doesn't simply stiff arm the carbon customers and refuse to negotiate. That's the piece that you would inject some level of commission adjudication, but you would hold it there and stop at having the commission then go ahead and set a price and basically substitute its judgment for the marketplace.
Gotcha. Senator Scott, have you heard about this one before?
No, but I'm familiar with the general issue.
Are you sympathetic?
I'm not as sympathetic as I might be.
Okay.
But it would be workable if there's a different party there. Frankly, the state has an interest in the CO2 being used for enhanced oil and gas recovery. And I have heard the utility involved saying that the key thing is the federal subsidy for deep sequestration. And I'm afraid there's a deep-seated prejudice there. But it may be moot unless Rocky Mountain Power changes its mind, which it can, and decides to retain the plant and keep. We might have to do something about that if they just won't consider the enhanced oil recovery, partly because of pressure from their West Coast regulators.
Okay.
So I am concerned about the change.
Let's leave this open. We haven't moved any of the amendments yet. So is there anything else you might add, Mr. Nelson?
No, not at this time. Again, I think the amendments do a nice job of addressing a lot of the issues that I'd raised, and I appreciate that. And we'll have more time as the process goes forward, potentially to look at the other details. But by and large, I think the amendment is a good one. And just with that other addition, I think it makes the bill lots more workable.
Okay. You're sure we're not welding on the Hindenburg, are you? In flight? Okay. Anybody else? Thank you, Mr. Nelson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and committee.
Who else would like to address the amendment? And if you haven't testified before, we take original testimony too. Anybody want to address the amendment? Mr. Bush.
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. David Bush with Black Hills Energy. First off, again, want to add more laudits for the commission and the senators that have worked on this bill and this amendment to try to make it better. I guess I feel compelled as one of the other investor-owned utilities that this may impact to testify and say, I'm not sure where we are on this, honestly. I know there's a provision in here that holds it to a 300 megawatt unit, which we don't wholly own a 300 megawatt unit. We are a 20% owner of the Wyodak facility, which Senator Scott and others have said would not be part of this because of the closure date, estimated closure date of Wyodak at this time doesn't fit in with the bill. But at this point, honestly, I unfortunately don't have my attorney or my regulatory team here to look at this. I know there are lots of attorneys here, but none of them represent our company, unfortunately. So at this time, I think, I don't know. Mr. Chairman, this is a lot. I would hope that we're not sort of collateral damage in this, because I understand the purpose of the bill and what Senator Scott is trying to accomplish with this. But at this point, I just don't know. Trying to track in all these amendments in 20 minutes or so is very difficult. So
That's fair.
yeah,
It's really fair.
I'm not sure what testimony I'm giving here, Mr. Chairman, but I'm just saying, at this time, I just, as one of the utilities, I felt like we needed to maybe voice our opinion on this, and I don't think we can say yes or no that this is a good bill at this point.
Senator Scott?
Question. The Wyodak plant, which is the large one that you have a share in,
Yes, sir.
that is not slated for closure before 2034, is it?
Correct.
I believe so, yes.
And, Mr. Chairman, I
Go ahead.
would point out on the bill unamended, and it's not amended anywhere in this part, page 10, line 6, speaks to electric, coal-fired electric generation units slated for retirement or closure before 2034. So I believe the plant he would be concerned about is 5 years after that, which is effectively a sunset date. And that's here, Mr. Chairman, because I don't think any of us have had good crystal ball enough to know what the world's going to be like that far out.
Might be fair. Mr. Bush, if you wish.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, that's what I referenced, is Wyodak with the effective date of the bill is probably out of it, and it sounds like it is, but I don't know if there are other considerations. I really, as much as I try to play one, I'm not a utility expert and would love to have my team look at this before I say yes or no on it. But anyway, just sharing some thoughts there, sir. But
Thank you. Fair enough. Anything for Mr. Bush? Thank you, Mr. Bush.
Thank
Who
you,
else would like to address the committee? Who else would like to address the committee? Yes, ma'am. Welcome. You got to pull that mic close because we're just having a hard time with this room today.
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, thank you very much. I'm Robin Engelhardt Bagley with Powder River Basin Resource Council. And we do still oppose this bill, but we do appreciate the efforts of the amendment. We do appreciate the efforts to work out some of these issues. However, this is a very complex issue, and we do encourage everyone to tread carefully. We also do support the agencies getting an appropriation. Otherwise, this is an unfunded mandate. And I would stand for any questions. Thank you.
Questions for Ms. Bagley? Any questions? Thank you, Ms. Bagley. Thank you very much. Thanks for coming down. Who else would like to address the committee? Who else? Mr. Kaysen, you guys, anybody online or anything you want to do?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, members are representatives are online.
You better use the microphone because it's got to go out to the world. Sorry about that.
My apologies, Mr. Chairman. Rick Kaysen with Rocky Mountain Power. And we do have representatives that are available or going to participate remotely. If
Kelly?
they could be entered.
Yeah, we can,
Richard Garlish, yes, ma'am. Or, sorry, Mr. Chairman, Richard Garlish.
should we go to him?
Your prerogative, but I think the timing would be good.
All right, if we can get Mr. Garlish on, let's hear from him.
Good afternoon, Chairman. Can you hear me okay?
I think we're getting an echo. Hold on, Mr. Garlish, you're coming in from a different way.
Okay.
I think he's coming in through that computer. It's okay. Just by looking out here, who else is going to want to testify today? Just raise your hand. That's not all the way up, Mr. AC. That's only to your ear. Yes, sir. Why don't we're going to skip you, Mr. Garlish. We're going to return to you. So hang in there. We've got another gentleman here. I'm sorry, I don't remember your name. I know you introduced yourself the other day. Go ahead. Green light.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My name is Wally Walski. I'm here with Glenrock Energy. We're here today to support all the work that took place over the past few days. I guess anytime you have legislation, particularly enabling legislation, it is complex, and having input from different entities, even though some of them aren't on the same page, it is a compromise process. So we applaud the work that was done behind the scenes. Thank you, sir.
Any questions for the gentleman? Thank you very much for coming down and hanging in here.
Thank you.
How are we doing on Mr. Garlish?
Hello?
We can hear you, Mr. Garlish, but we have this strange echo. You're actually coming in a different way than our usual witnesses, and it might be because of mics being on. Can we shut off your mic, Senator Scott? Can we try it again, Mr. Garlish? Can we hear you?
Good afternoon.
Well, that's better. Go ahead, sir.
Okay. I appreciate the chance to speak to the committee again, Chairman. First of all, I understand that there was a lot of work to make the bill better, and by a subset of people that participated in the process. I struggle with the compromise piece of it. There's the 40, I think it was 46-page bill when we started. This is an 8-page amendment that I've gone to look at for about 10 minutes. But just as an observation, I noticed that it might make some of the structural things better for the agency, but I don't even know if it addresses any of the concerns that we raised. So it's, from my perspective, not much of a compromise. And then, I don't know what to do with it, because it's a lot to take in and absorb. And with the 300 megawatt language, this impacts Rocky Mountain Power more than anybody else. And what it means for our customers and our company is hard to take in like this. But I will say that yesterday we provided the committee some updates on our RFP process. And the next steps in the RFP process are February 11th, 2023 is the last day we take questions. March 7th is bid proposal due date. June through August, we complete our RFP evaluation, including IRP sensitivity modeling and received bids. I think the way the bill stands now, it's effective immediately. So with all these unresolved issues that are in this bill, it becomes effective immediately. The question came earlier, like, will it slow down the 200 process? I don't see in the current state how it could not, because we will have to stop to figure out how to comply with this bill, plus 200, 159, as will the commission. We will be afraid of being in conflict of both processes. So I apologize for sounding frustrated, but it's pretty frustrating. So with that, I'll answer any questions.
I love your testimony that you apologize for being frustrated, but you're frustrated. It's okay. Thank you, Mr.
Sorry,
Garlish.
not sorry, if I'm being honest.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Garlish. Let's let the senator respond. Senator Scott?
Mr. Chairman, I can understand why you might be frustrated. That's why we saw it early and met with him on the 5th of August and then again and asked for suggestions. We met again first week in October and couldn't get suggestions other than go away. So we were frustrated in that. And I think we could have perhaps had a better product if there'd been some willingness to participate, but there wasn't.
Well, now we're getting that echo again, Mr. Garlish. Shut your mic off, Senator Scott. And that might be the culprit. It's a Zoom.
Mr.
Go ahead, we'll go
Chairman,
back to you, Mr. Garlish. He took a shot at you, I don't know.
I've said all along that, it's very, very hard to do a CCUS project. And in my view of the summertime, we were engaged. We made several trips to Casper, several trips, sit down, talk to Senator Scott and other stakeholders, and we're very candid about our challenges in moving a project forward in Wyoming. And from our perspective, those were good conversations. The fact that we couldn't agree on what, our basic view is the 200 process is the right process to move CCUS forward. That's not Senator Scott's view. I respect that, but like the willingness, I'm not sure how else to demonstrate that in terms of complying with the law, voluntarily committing in a 10th Circuit settlement docket to move CCUS forward, spending time and resources to move it forward and provide updates. I just don't think that some of that criticism is accurate. So I'll just let it go at that.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Garlish. We do appreciate you being here. Committee, any other questions for Mr. Garlish? Not seeing anything, Mr. Garlish, stay close. Any other testimony on this bill with the amendments? Any other testimony on this bill? Kelly? Okay, Mr. Randolph on Zoom? Mr. Randolph?
Can you hear me there, sir?
We can hear you. Go ahead.
Okay. I've read this bill originally when it came out in the Senate side of the thing.
Hey,
and
Mr. Randolph,
Yes, sir.
would you mind introducing yourself before you start?
Oh, okay. Charles Randolph, just a citizen in Wheatland.
Okay,
And,
welcome.
but I've been following lots of things on this in the House and the Senate this year. I'm very
Okay.
interested in environmental issues and everything like that. And I'm just kind of curious. They've talked a lot about sequestering and everything like that, and taking the carbon dioxide and using it to push push oil and gas out of the ground and everything like this. But I'm just kind of wondering, has anybody made a idea that there's other things we can use this for? For a fact, I know that you can take the carbon dioxide, mix it with minerals, and turn into really very good building blocks like bricks. They're very durable, and to be honest with you, they're extremely white too, also. And I'm just wondering, is there any plan to maybe also put that forward other than just putting it in the ground and pushing oil and gas around?
So, Mr. Randolph, I think Senator Scott wants to try to answer that for you.
Okay.
Let's go ahead, Senator Scott.
Mr. Chairman, our integrated test facility up Gillette Way is working on a number of those things. Some of them I think are quite promising. What it looks like at this point to handle the volumes that you're talking about with a coal-fired power plant, you're primarily either oil and gas tertiary recovery, such as we're now doing in the Salt Creek field in my district, which has been very profitable for both the state and the companies involved, and other oil fields, that or the deep sequestration with the federal subsidies. The pipeline ability to move CO2 is improving, and if a process arises out of the integrated test center work, I think being able to tap into one of those pipelines will satisfy it. But at this point, they don't look like high volume users of CO2, Mr. Chairman. So we're certainly open to that and open to that as a future use. But it's still not yet ready for prime time, is my understanding.
Mr. Randolph, did you get that?
Yes, sir, I did.
Do you have any other thoughts you'd like to leave us with, Mr. Randolph?
Well, like I said, Wyoming is a semi-arid area, and it doesn't seem like around my house this year. But anyway, to make a long point short, we're having problems keeping water, and now we're going to have to give away a bunch more to the Colorado Authority downstream. And I'm just worried that, when you mix water and carbon dioxide, but you end up with soda water or carbolic acid, and that is going to affect the quality of any water that, we use for agriculture or whatever. And I'm just concerned that if we keep pumping a bunch of carbon dioxide in, and we're going to turn some of our aquifers into soda water. And I think that should be a concern of ours. And I'm just want to make sure that we're not just going to come up with this idea of putting it all on the ground and shoving coal and gas and oil around. There are other sources or other things we can use it for. And I think we should also look at those, because those would be good industries for Wyoming, because we have the minerals and we have the carbon dioxide, obviously, that we could use for these things to build things like blocks and stuff like that, building blocks and stuff like that. I just don't want it to be left on the side there and say, let's just do the easy thing.
Thank you, Mr. Randolph. Any other questions for Mr. Randolph? Thank you very much, sir. We appreciate you being here.
Thank
And you live next door to one of the bigger plants in the country that's left, the Laramie River Station.
Yeah, I was the agent for the railroad when they built that.
I'll be darned. Well,
Yeah.
Thanks for joining us. I was
you're
in
welcome, sir.
college and I wrote a paper on the water demands of that plant. All right, back to this room. We're online. We got anybody that wants to talk to us? No more online? Anybody want to talk to us on here before we start working this bill? Not seeing anything. Committee, you've heard the testimony. What is your pleasure?
Mr. Chairman, move the bill.
Okay, we got a motion by Scott.
Mr. Chairman, move the proposed amendment with the one addition that the Public Service Commission just caught on page 2, line 23, deleting facility, inserting unit.
Okay. So Debbie, what he's suggesting is this big, long amendment, plus adding to it the question on page 2, line 23, changing the word facility to unit as part of this amendment. We'll pretend like it's part of it. And we're combining all that together for right now. Discussion?
Just real quickly, Mr.
Go ahead, Senator Landon.
I just want to make sure we had another suggestion or two from Commissioner Throne. Does this capture? We're good? Okay, thank you, Mr. Chairman.
I think we might have some more, but we're going to do one at a time. So, anybody? Call for the question on the amendment with the addition of the word facility on page 2. Senator Barlow.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I thought you were going to, that was just a friendly addition to the amendment. Okay,
Yeah,
so
I think it's friendly.
Okay, yeah, okay.
Is that
Mr.
okay?
Chairman,
We just handle it all at once?
yeah, I apologize. Page 7 of the amendment, Mr. Chairman, line 21 and 22. And this is really just a maybe grammatical or.
I'm not
flow-
sure they can hear you. Your
flow of the
microphone takes a
language.
dip at the end, so.
Okay, so line 21, after 2, insert A. So under this section, 2A, carbon capture customer instead of customers.
Okay,
And then on line 22, strike the word to. So then it would read, the entirety would read, any public utility selling a coal-fired electric generation unit under WS, under this section, to a carbon capture customer may request the commission determine whether the public utilities actions satisfy. Like I said, Mr. Chairman, I don't know that it's critical, but I think it just cleanliness. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
okay, let's see. Is that friendly, Senator
Mr.
Scott?
Chairman, it's very friendly. It improves the language.
Is that friendly, Commissioner Throne? In the old days? I know, but it used to be. Okay, we got the amendment, and you got that one too, Debbie. Thank you very much. All right. pushing for the question on the big amendment? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? That amendment is carried. Back on the bill. What else did we have? Do we want to take up Mr. Nelson's? These are from the DEQ. Mr. Parfit, you want to come up again? Is there anything on the DEQ's amendments you want to take up or ask him questions about? Just a sec, Mr. Parfit. We're going to get Senator Scott to get his copy. Do you need another copy, Senator Scott?
No, it's buried here.
I think
Go ahead.
Kelly's bringing you one.
Go ahead.
Senator Landon.
Mr. Chairman, I was just going to remind, we've got a consideration brought forth by the industrial consumers.
Yep,
Mr. Nelson,
we do.
jump in, but anyway.
We do. So, Mr. Parfit, why don't we let Senator Scott look at your amendment for a little bit longer? Well, Senator Scott, go to you.
Mr. Chairman, on his amendment, all but the first item here, and maybe some on the back page, all the items on the first page except the first one were made moot when we removed the bonding provision.
Right. But the very first one,
I don't have strong feelings about. I thought we'd covered it, and I think we managed to miss that as we went through things. You've heard my opinion on the appropriation. I think we'd be better off waiting on that. The other ones, on page 41, 42, Mr. Chairman, I have no problem with.
Mr. Parfit, you want to make a case? Go ahead.
Maybe drink a cake.
Mr. Chairman, I agree. The first bullet on page 8, line 23, with the language related to Class 6, I think that's important just to make sure that we don't run afoul with the primacy for that program. That's probably the most important one. And then on the second page of the handout, like I said, the first bullet, the page 41, line 19, I think the language, although it could be maybe a little bit different, I think it's satisfied with the existing language and be fine. Page 42, line 4 through 6, just again, if the commission is already in consultation with the DEQ and writing the report, I don't know that we need language that says that we will report to the commission on how we've spent the money. The point behind that was so that we could be reimbursed for any expenditures, but if there's an appropriation, I think that makes that moot, and so it would make sense to delete the first part of that line 40, or page 42, line 4 through 6. And then again, on page 42, line 8 through 11, again, this accounting with the Public Service Commission, I don't think we need if we're going to go to an appropriation at the budget session.
Okay. So does this collapse down to just, can somebody synthesize this down to one motion? Go ahead, Senator Boner.
I'll give it a shot. I'm sure the director could correct me if I.
And he's welcome to stay close.
So I move to the DEQ suggested amendments on page 8, page 41, and page 42.
Mr. Parfit, you good with that? You can push.
Mr. Chairman, just for clarification, I think the
With the exception
language.
of the, exception on page, lines 4 and 6 on 42. My bad.
So, Mr. Chairman, I would agree with that, with the exclusion of the insertion language on page 42. It should come out.
Yeah. Senator Scott, are you getting some of this?
Okay, so we're going to do the ones on 41 and 42, except that we won't insert the appropriation. Is that correct?
Correct. In addition to the first one on page 8.
Yeah, and that's fine.
Okay. Debbie, you're going to need some help with that one, I think. Maybe you're with us. Senator Boner, will you make sure that she gets that? All right, thank you. Discussion on the amendment? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you, Mr. Parfit. You make a good legislator. Mr. Nelson's next, I think, right? Okay, what do we got for Mr. Nelson? Senator Landon?
Mr. Chairman, maybe with your permission, Mr. Nelson would be willing to come up and remind us. I tracked it in at one point and I've lost my way.
I think
Do you have
Senator
it? Senator
Boner
do you have it?
might have it. Let's see what he says. You're welcome to take a seat.
Same thing, Mr. Chairman. I move on page 29, line 9, after the word party, comma, insert the following. Determine if the public utility complied with subsection A of this paragraph and strike the rest of section B.
29, right?
Yeah, page 29, line 9.
I think you just keep going down the page. Right, Mr. Nelson?
Yeah, you would then,
Is your microphone on? Just check.
yes, sorry, you would then, the suggestion was then to delete the rest of page 29 and the rest of page 30, which are all subparts documenting how the commission is to set a price for carbon if the commission does so.
Exactly.
That's my movement for discussion.
Okay,
So, Mr. Chairman, just real quickly, Senator Boner, whereabouts did you track that in, beginning
page 20, line 99,
line 9? Okay,
after party,
okay.
coming to a party here. And then, Senator Scott, you okay with this?
Mr. Chairman, I would mildly prefer not to do it, but I'm not going to fight over it. Frankly, I think the section will probably wind up being moot because it would apply really only if the incumbent power company decided to retain the facility.
Right.
And I think they don't want to.
It would be in a case we lose arm's length.
Yeah.
Okay?
We're okay, yeah.
Debbie, well, Senator Boner's going to help with that one too. Okay. All right, any more discussion? You guys ready? Senator Barlow?
Mr. Chairman, so I just want to clarify, I thought that was the striking of much of 206, but wasn't there a suggestion also to strike all of 207? Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Nelson, to you.
Mr. Chairman, when I testified originally, I had suggested to strike 207. From WIAC's perspective, we don't think it's necessary. Having said that, in the effort to try to compromise and hone in on what's most important to WIAC, I limited my comments today to just 206. Having said that, I don't think 207 is strictly necessary, but I would defer to you all whether you agree with that or not. But 206 is the bigger problem from my perspective.
Okay, why don't we deal with the 206 first with the amendment that Senator Boner has presented? And is there any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Okay, and if anybody wants to take up 207, they can. Is there anything else we need to take up on the bill? Anything else on the bill, Senator Scott?
Oh, question of the bill.
Okay, Debbie, call the roll on the bill.
Senator Barlow? Aye. Senator Boner?
Aye.
Senator Landon?
Aye.
Senator Scott?
Aye.
And Mr. Chairman?
Aye. Thank you, committee. Thanks, everybody out there. And Senator Scott, good work. You know how to make law.
Mr. Chairman, thank you very much. I did consult with the LSO about the substitute bill possibility, and the timing doesn't work.
Yeah, they really discourage it. I'm counting on Senator Scott and Senator Boner to make sure we got this last bill with all the amendments tracked in. So Debbie, okay? Thank you all. Are you going to come back for tolling? It'll be upon adjournment today. And we're putting the authority for setting the toll rates with the Public Service Commission. It's going to be fabulous. And DEQ is going to monitor the toll boost.
Representative Drone, you're welcome back anytime.
Especially on toll.
We're adjourned.
Thank you all very much.
Oh, Charlie, we love you. We wouldn't do it for anybody.
Yeah.
That's for sure.
40-some years earns him some points, right?
It does.